The Hunt for Red October plays like a Cold War thriller built out of pressure and silence. A Soviet captain turning a submarine toward the unknown. Sonar pings cutting through the dark like warning shots. Men whispering orders inside steel corridors with the ocean pressing on every wall. Jack Ryan trying to read one man's soul before both navies start firing. And Sean Connery holding the whole mystery together with a calm that makes you believe every impossible thing the plot asks of you. But under that polished surface, the movie nearly got sunk more than once. While the director was away, the studio almost recut it into Top Gun underwater, faster, louder, and completely wrong for the movie. The open water was an illusion. Almost the entire film was built on sets where every ounce of pressure had to be manufactured by hand. And as the cameras rolled, the real world shifted so fast the movie nearly outlived the Cold War before it even reached theaters. These are 11 weird facts about The Hunt for Red October, the Cold War thriller that arrived as the Cold War was ending and somehow hit harder because of it. Stay to the end because the most Soviet thing in the movie was actually made in Los Angeles. Tom Clancy wrote the book in 1984, and the novel found its way to Ronald Reagan, who read it, loved it, and publicly called it the perfect yarn. That single endorsement turned what had been a small specialty release into a major bestseller overnight. Producer Mace Neufeld optioned it in 1985, and by every reasonable measure, Hollywood should have raced for it. Hollywood did not race for anything. For the next 18 months, Neufeld walked the manuscript from studio to studio, and every door closed in front of him. MGM passed. Every other studio passed. They looked at the book and could not see past the technical density to the thriller underneath. The novel was packed with naval strategy, sonar, command chains, Russian politics, and long stretches of tension built around quiet decisions rather than action. It read like a procedural for people who already loved military hardware. The chase, the moral center, the cat and mouse were all in there, buried under detail that scared every studio reader who opened the manuscript. The movie was saved by one airplane ride. In 1986, Neufeld handed the book to Ned Tannen, chairman of Paramount's Motion Picture Group, as he was boarding a flight to London. Tannen read it on the plane, and by the time he landed, he wanted Paramount to make the film. Even then, the adaptation was nowhere near ready. The screenplay went through 22 drafts. The 1988 Writers Guild strike delayed work by nearly 6 months. Larry Ferguson and Donald Stewart spent draft after draft pulling the thriller out of the procedural, figuring out which parts of the technical density needed to stay, which parts had to go, and how to translate strategic decisions into cinematic tension. A book that had been ignored by every studio reader in town had survived an entire industry's worth of doubt. The version of The Hunt for Red October the world remembers nearly did not exist. McTiernan had stepped away during post-production, and while he was gone, an unnamed Paramount executive walked into the editing suite and gave the editors a simple, dramatic order: recut the film as if it were Top Gun 2. The logic was cynically simple. By 1989, submarine drama looked like a niche genre, and Top Gun had been a runaway phenomenon for Paramount in 1986. The executive believed audiences would never sit through a methodical, dialogue-heavy thriller about naval strategy. He wanted aggressive pacing, frequent explosions, the pop-action energy that had powered Top Gun to a generation-defining hit. McTiernan later described the situation with quiet disbelief, saying the executive had tried to somehow turn submarines into airplanes. A slow, claustrophobic deep-sea movie was being rebuilt as a soundtrack-driven adrenaline machine with the director nowhere in the room to stop it. McTiernan got back before the damage was done. When he returned to the editing suite, he did not shout. He did not make a scene. He simply asked the editors a quiet question. "Guys, what's going on here?" That was enough. The Top Gun recut never happened. McTiernan retained creative control, and the film stayed steely, tense, and character-driven, built around intelligence, sonar tracking, and high-stakes staring contests. One executive came close to turning a submarine film into a sequel nobody asked for. Instead, it became the best movie about submarines ever made. The most iconic Soviet captain in American cinema was not the production's first choice. For 2 weeks of shooting, that role belonged to Klaus Maria Brandauer, Austrian, Oscar-nominated, the man McTiernan had originally cast as the rogue captain. Brandower had already worked inside the Bond universe, playing villain Maximilian Largo in Never Say Never Again opposite Connery's Return to 007, and he was a serious choice by every measure. He was hired, costumed, and shooting. Then he was gone. Around 2 weeks into production, a serious leg injury made the physical demands of submarine filming impossible, and Brandower walked off with footage already in the can. For most films, that is a crisis. For this one, it became a turn, because before he left, Brandower did something rare for an actor walking off a major production. He personally recommended his replacement. He told the producers there was one man who could carry the weight of Ramius, and that man was Sean Connery. The two had become close friends during Never Say Never Again, and the recommendation came from the actor who knew the role best, pointing at the one man he believed could land it. Casting Connery, reshooting Brandower's scenes, and adjusting the schedule added roughly $4 million to the budget. The cost was real, but Connery had the role. Connery walked into it with one decision already made. He was not going to attempt a Russian accent. The most famous Soviet submarine captain in movie history would speak in his native Scottish voice, the same voice he had used as James Bond, as the King of England, in essentially every role of his career. Audiences picked up on it immediately. Critics noted it. Nobody involved in the film cared. The retroactive justification was in the novel itself. In Clancy's book, Ramius is Lithuanian, not ethnic Russian, and fans have used that detail for years to explain the casting. But the film had already decided its real rule, the one almost every Sean Connery production lives by: verisimilitude is subordinate to character. What made the cast incredible in a different way was Connery's actual history. He had served 3 years in the British Royal Navy on HMS Formidable as an anti-aircraft gunner and knew what military service felt like from the inside. He refused to let the costume department dress him in stylized Hollywood naval gear and worked directly with wardrobe to make sure Ramius's uniform looked weathered and structurally accurate, the way a real captain who had spent decades in cold water would wear it. The accent was Scottish. The uniform was real. The wig was the fake part. McTiernan asked Connery to wear one for Ramius to give the captain a younger, more imposing silhouette, and the first version came with a small ponytail. Connery liked the ponytail. The crew mocked it. McTiernan hated it. After a few shooting days, the ponytail was removed, which meant every scene already shot with it had to be redone. The cost of those reshoots ran around $20,000, and McTiernan nicknamed the wig accordingly. The $20,000 hairpiece was not the wig itself. It was the price of getting rid of its tail. None of those choices should have worked. Somehow they assembled themselves into the most unforgettable Soviet captain in American cinema. While Connery was building Ramius out of accent stubbornness and a borrowed uniform, the American captain hunting him was being built a completely different way. Scott Glenn was known for tough guy intensity by 1989, a career built on hard-edged soldiers and cowboys who solved problems with force. So when he was cast as Commander Bart Mancuso, captain of the USS Dallas, everyone expected that same energy. A loud, aggressive American sub-captain going up against the Russians. That is not what showed up on set. What showed up was a soft-spoken, almost contemplative officer. Understated authority instead of barked orders. Calm under pressure rather than visible tension. Filmmakers later described the performance as like a college president, a complete inversion of the Scott Glenn the industry had hired. It was not a choice he had made on his own. He had stolen the entire performance from a real man. Before filming, the production arranged for Glenn to spend an overnight ride-along aboard the USS Salt Lake City, a real American submarine cruising off San Diego. The ship's captain, Commander Thomas B. Fargo, ordered his crew to treat Glenn as co-equal rank for the duration of the visit. Glenn was not a passenger watching from a corner. He was inside the command structure, watching Fargo run a real submarine in real time. Fargo was not loud. He did not project authority through volume. He gave orders softly. He stayed still in moments where others would have moved. The men obeyed without being shouted at because the command structure ran on something other than fear. Glenn watched and decided what Mancuso was. In his own words, he stole the whole performance because Fargo was perfect. The man Glenn studied for one overnight cruise went on to become Admiral Thomas B. Fargo, rising to 4-star rank and serving as commander of U.S. Pacific Command, one of the most senior military positions in the United States. The understated officer hosting a Hollywood actor for a single night was decades later running the largest combatant command on Earth. The realism in The Hunt for Red October was built on two completely different productions running simultaneously. Real Navy submarines on the water, and massive mechanical interiors physically moving on sound stages at Paramount. Tom Clancy and Mace Neufeld sold the film to the U.S. Navy as a possible Top Gun for submarines, recruiting-friendly showcase for the silent service. The argument worked, and Paramount was charged only operational reimbursement, far below what that level of military access would normally cost. 6 different submarines were loaned to the film across the production. The USS Houston played the on-camera Dallas for a month of shooting, with the crew nicknaming it Hunt for Red Ops. Houston performed more than 40 emergency surfacing blows for the cameras, driving bow first vertically out of the water again and again until the strain cracked its fiberglass sonar dome. Paramount paid the Navy around $5 million to repair the damage. But the submarines could only give the movie its exterior world. The interiors had to be built. The production took over 5 Paramount sound stages. The set budget exceeded $7 million. Both the Red October and Dallas interiors were built on massive hydraulic gimbals roughly 50 feet by 50 feet, capable of pitching and rolling about 25 degrees, with crew descriptions putting the felt intensity closer to 45 in operation. When the boats dove, climbed, or took a hit on screen, the floors were actually shifting under the actors. Coffee mugs really moved. Crew members really staggered. Actors really grabbed pipes to stay upright. The physicality audiences saw was the cast actually fighting the submarine from the inside. That physical realism created a new problem. The Hunt for Red October cuts between 3 submarines that look almost identical from the inside, and somehow the audience never gets lost. Cinematographer Jan de Bont solved it before the cuts even started. He gave each submarine its own color. Red October was lit in cool blues. USS Dallas in deeper reds. Conoval in green. Before a viewer could process the dialogue or identify a uniform, the lighting had already told them which boat they were inside. The system borrowed from reality. Real Navy submarines light their interiors by condition: red for night operations, white for day, blue for tactical low glare. De Bont's choices looked like a submarine because they were drawn from how submarines actually work. Audiences never noticed the system consciously. They never got lost, but they never stopped to ask why either. The film solved a screenwriting problem entirely through cinematography. Color told audiences which submarine they were watching. Smoke told them they were underwater. Some of the most iconic shots in the film were built in completely dry air on a soundstage, no water, no tanks. The ocean in those shots does not exist. It was conjured. The original effects work was assigned to Boss Film Studios, but about 5 months into production that arrangement collapsed, and the entire job moved to Industrial Light and Magic with roughly 3 months to complete around 50 shots. The miniature fleet ILM inherited was enormous: 7 submarine models plus a torpedo and a rescue submersible, with the hero Red October running 21 feet long. ILM decided not to shoot underwater at all. The deadline made real water photography impossible, so the models were filmed dry on smoke-filled stages. Motion control cameras and hanging rigs gave the models smooth pitch and yaw. Mirror systems let cameras get close without revealing scale. The smoke handled the water itself. Atmospheric haze lit and shot to mimic how light scatters in deep ocean. The submarines were not moving through water. They were moving through air thick enough to look like it. ILM then layered early CGI on top: plankton, bubbles, particulate matter, wake distortion, providing exactly the detail an audience subconsciously expects from a deep water shot. The Navy gave the film its surface. ILM built the depths from scratch. In 1988, when the film was greenlit, the Cold War was the defining political reality on Earth. Paramount was making a hypercurrent thriller about a world everyone in the theater already lived in. Then the world ended. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. By the time the film opened on March 2, 1990, The wall had been down for nearly 4 months, and Mikhail Gorbachev was introducing sweeping democratic reforms across the Soviet Union. Paramount panicked. The fear was that audiences would reject a film about nuclear war with the Soviets as suddenly irrelevant. The fix was a single opening text crawl placing the action in 1984, retrofitting the entire film into a period piece. That one decision saved the movie, and the cultural shift turned out to be working in the film's favor. Audiences walked in not with dread, but with strange relief. The film became historical fascination, a window into the world they had just escaped. Without active Cold War terror in their heads, Ramius and his crew read differently, not as enemies, but as sympathetic figures making a moral choice inside a collapsing system. A thriller about paranoia opened into a world where the paranoia had already lifted and landed harder because of it. The film debuted at number 1, grossed roughly $200 million worldwide on a $30 million budget, and finished as the 6th highest-grossing domestic film of 1990. It won the Oscar for Best Sound Effects Editing, a film about a silent submarine taking home the prize for sound. Jack Ryan, played by Alec Baldwin in his first major screen appearance, became one of the longest-running franchise figures in American film and television, eventually portrayed by Harrison Ford, Ben Affleck, Chris Pine, and John Krasinski across 4 decades. Tom Clancy's name expanded into one of the most successful brands in entertainment history, with Rainbow Six and Splinter Cell alone turning a military thriller into a gaming empire, all traceable back to an insurance broker whose novel almost did not get published. The opening of The Hunt for Red October convinces audiences of something that has never been true. A male chorus, modal harmonies, deep open fifths of Russian Orthodox traditions swelling into full orchestra, a sound audiences instinctively recognize as Soviet military music. For 35 years, millions of viewers have assumed it was a real Soviet anthem. It is not. The composer was Basil Polidouris, a Greek-American working in Los Angeles. He wrote the hymn to Red October entirely from scratch, composing the music, writing the lyrics himself in English, then having them translated into Russian only because the surface had to sound right. The lyrics, translated back, begin roughly, cold, hard, empty, farewell again, our dear land, motherland, native home, farewell. Polidouris wrote them to capture Ramius's grief, the goodbye of a Soviet officer leaving the country he had served for the system he had decided to betray. Audiences hear it as patriotism. The film is using it as the false front Ramius is about to abandon. The score is doing 2 contradictory things at once, and most viewers feel only the first. A film about the Cold War opens with a Soviet anthem that never existed, and audiences have been singing along to it for 35 years. Which fact caught you off guard the most? Drop it in the comments, like, subscribe, and send this to the person who showed you The Hunt for Red October the first time. They knew exactly what they were doing.